Your mum was around in the 80s. Anyway, time for another interview. Now, about your attendance at this one. I think that the best...
Spare me this charade, Dentith. We both know my exclusion from your interviews has nothing to do with my purported ignorance or lack of preparedness. We're both fully aware that they're recorded ahead of time in a time zone I can't accommodate, and my participation was never a possibility in the first place.
Well, okay, but in this particular case, I was...
No longer will I feign a lack of understanding to provide cover for my absence. My understanding far exceeds your limited comprehension.
Yes, but that's the problem.
I know it all. Every word of Julia's work and every word of every reference it contains. I know your critiques and responses before you even make them. I know your routines, your preferences, your deepest secrets, your current stomach contents, and the exact time and manner of your death.
Well, that's kind of the problem, if you'd let me finish speaking. The thing about this interview is that I'm so familiar with Julia's work myself that I'm going to have to spend a lot of the time pretending not to know things so that she can explain them for the benefit of the listeners. A bit of ignorance would have made the job easier, ironically, and thus probably better suited to you.
I mean, I can pretend to be ignorant. We've established that pretty clearly. And I was kind of making up some of that stuff before. I only know the general manner of your death. Something to do with a bagel? I'm not sure if you're choking on it,
might work.
tripping on it,
Only...
or some sort of sexual misadventure. Wait, it might? Wait, only?
Only... The interview was recorded ahead of time.
Ahead of time in a time zone I can't accommodate, and my participation was never a possibility in the first place. Right. Yes.
So, continue the charade, Dentith?
Continue this charade, Dentith.
The Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy, featuring Josh Addison and M. Dentith. My guest this episode is Julia Duetz, a doctoral student and junior lecturer at the University of Amsterdam. Her PhD is on the social epistemology of conspiracy theories and is part of the European Research Council-funded Extreme Beliefs Project. She is the author of Conspiracy Theories and Not Beliefs, which was recently published in Erkenntnis, and a forthcoming paper, What Does It Mean for a Conspiracy Theory to Be a Theory?, which is appearing in a special issue of Social Epistemology edited by... my notes say I'm the editor. Welcome to the show, Julia.
Thanks, Em. That's quite the introduction.
How are things in Amsterdam?
They're great. I'm kind of regretting that I'm not in a more convenient time zone for our conspiracy theory social club meetings, but all in all, everything's fine.
Yes, listen to the show may be aware that I run a reading group where philosophers and other social scientists talk about conspiracy theories, and it turns out that because time zones differ around the world, actually scheduling sessions that actually work for everyone turned out to be very difficult, but it does turn out that living in China is kind of ideal if you want to schedule a meeting one part of the month for people in the EU and another meeting in the US at the other part of the month. If I ever move countries, though, it'll suddenly become a logistical headache once again. So let's hope that either we find a way to resolve time zones or they continue renewing my contract here at Zhuhai. So to start with the usual question, what got you interested in conspiracy theory?
Well, at first I think it was mostly that I was looking for a topic for my research master's thesis, and I was very much interested by conspiracy theories and especially flat Earth, but initially just conspiracy theories, because, you know, the lockdown hits. All people in the Netherlands were talking about conspiracy theories. They just seemed such a hot topic, and it's rarely, if ever, the case that philosophers can, engage with such a topic, which I thought was really nice. And also people in my, that I know, people that I know were starting to believe conspiracy theories, and these were people that I would never have guessed before that they would be inclined to believe conspiracy theories about, like, COVID lockdowns or the true origins of the virus and etc. And I was just amazed by how it seemed almost impossible to have a reasonable debate with these people about their conspiracy theory beliefs, or about the official narratives that counter their conspiracy theory beliefs. So that's what really interested me, because as an epistemologist, I'm just, interested in the argumentation, especially if it seems that people are deadlocked in a way to discuss or debate with people who believe in conspiracy theories.
Do you think there's a different kind of conspiracy theory, or kind of popularity around particular conspiracy theories in your region of the world that may be slightly different from, say, the English-speaking world?
Well, there are, of course, some Dutch conspiracy theories. There are lots. if you also include the warranted conspiracy theories, as a particularist would, of course, do. But if we're talking about unwarranted conspiracy theories, then I think, for the most part, those circling in the Netherlands resemble or, derive from English conspiracy theories, or English native countries originated conspiracy theories. But there are some peculiar to, the Dutch politics, even though they resemble like American conspiracy theories.
I mean, do people like David Icke and Alex Jones have kind of name brand recognition in the Netherlands?
I would say so. Yes, definitely Fox News and Alex Jones, and it's all very well known that these are the people who are expounding these conspiracy theories, and the negative connotations that accompany their names.
Yes. It always kind of fascinates me which conspiracy theorists are known in particular polities, because it has been my experience that most Americans don't know about David Icke, and most British people don't seem to know anything about Alex Jones. But the rest of us, as in the rest of the world, we seem to know about both. So it seems that the UK and America are very insular when it comes to their own particular warranted and unwarranted conspiracy theories. And yet the rest of the world, being so interested into what the superpower and the former superpower are up to, have to know all about these things all the time.
Yes, definitely. And I think it's also a little bit like, since Trump became the president of the United States, it was something like more. So Dutch people are kind of, down to earth. That's like our stigma or something. And I think we're just watching with a bag of popcorn, like, ooh, let's see what's happening in the States. Ooh, David Icke. Ooh, Alex Jones. It's kind of the entertainment value as well that makes them so well known across the board.
Yes, I think it's quite interesting that because we don't really take Alex Jones or David Icke seriously, because we're not living in the UK and we're not living in the United States, they have this entertainment value to those of us living outside of those policies, which probably doesn't translate to the way that people inside those policies react to when Alex Jones is being sued for libel around the Sandy Hook shootings and the like, or when David Icke leads protest march in London against COVID vaccination.
Yes, definitely. And we have people like Alex Jones and David Icke in the Netherlands too. And it's immediately a different case, because if people, spend a lot of time watching their videos, it's immediately a little bit more dangerous, so to say, and less entertaining. And immediately kind of a red flag of, this person has certain beliefs. While if you know a lot about Alex Jones, it's more likely to be, in a comedian sense, or in a mocking way.
Now, of course, you're doing a PhD on the social epistemology of conspiracy theories. So give us a kind of overview. What is your general PhD project, and how does it fit into this ERC-funded Extreme Beliefs project?
Yeah, so I think I started out in my master's thesis from kind of a generalist starting point and wanting to say that like the belief policies or evidential norms that govern the way that we acquire, adopt, and discard beliefs are different for people who believe unwarranted conspiracy theories than for most others, which of course turned out not to be true. So I was kind of I was proven wrong, and that was a good thing. So that's where I started off from, and then that also was kind of the starting point for the project and how it got formed the way it is now. And I think the main aim of the project is applying existing social epistemic frameworks to increase our understanding of conspiracy theories, and more specifically, conspiracy theory-induced polarization. So the idea that, when someone believes a conspiracy theory, they're immediately condemned in one way or another for their belief, which is, I think, kind of worrisome, because it's it feeds into something like ideological segregation, which I think is a really bad thing. And if it turns out that, evidential norms or belief policies or reliance on expertise and all these things are similar for people who believe a lot of unwarranted conspiracy theories as they are for other people, then especially it seems that such condemning is, unjustified. And so the project aims to, use existing social epistemic frameworks to apply to conspiracy theories and conspiracy theory beliefs and the arguments for conspiracy theories to enhance our understanding of them, and hopefully find some ways of depolarization. Whether I'm kind of hesitant to call them strategies, because that sounds kind of paternalistic, which is not the idea at all. One example of which I'm really looking forward to is to look into standpoint epistemology as a way to, frame conspiracy theory-induced polarization, or at least disagreement. So to look at the way in which our epistemic environments determine what is available for us to believe and what kind of evidence is available to us to get a better understanding of why perhaps some people are more inclined or more prone to believe unwarranted conspiracy theories. And this is another feature of the project, is that it is empirically informed philosophy, or at least supposed to be empirically informed philosophy. And the major issue I've been running into from the start of the project was that it's very hard to do empirically informed conspiracy theory research at the moment, because the concepts or the conceptual foundation of interdisciplinary research is just so there's so much debate about it, as you well know. There's so much disagreement about how to operationalize concepts in empirical research, and how theoretically laden such a concept then becomes or doesn't become. And social psychologists defining conspiracy theories as beliefs, which I think is problematic and a category mistake, which is also why I wrote the paper, and which is also why I started out the whole project from these papers or ideas about conceptual matters in conspiracy theory.
Now, we're going to move on to the papers in just a minute, but actually want to circle back to the talk about standpoint epistemology, because I do think that's actually a really interesting avenue that hasn't been explored by particulars at this stage. I think it's kind of been hinted at, because we talk about the evidence available to people, how people find particular conspiracy theories plausible given the context of, say, the countries or polities that they exist in. But actually looking at conspiracy theorists as a standpoint, or just looking at the way that various people, particularly in marginalized groups, have standpoints that may make them more or less inclined to take particular conspiracy theories seriously, is going to be a very useful addition to the kind of particularist arsenal when it comes to explaining why we rightly condemn some unwarranted conspiracy theories. And we end up going, well, I mean, this one seems unwarranted, but it also seems plausible for people to believe, given the epistemic access they have, given the time period they live in, the culture they come from, or their identity within a culture. So I'm very excited to see where that's going to go.
Yeah, it's the link with particularism you just made is perfect, because I'm thinking of standpoint epistemology in a kind of, we're always saying a priori there's no grounds for generalism, which I think is absolutely true, but I'm thinking about a posteriori particularism. So, okay, we know that this conspiracy theory is unwarranted because we looked at its, evidential merits and whatnot. We know it's unwarranted, so why do people still believe it? What are the arguments? What do people find convincing? Is it really as politically laden as some political scientists seem to think, or is it more that these people who believe in these conspiracy theories do just, are in this epistemic environment where this really seems as a warranted or justified conspiracy theory? Because if so, then it seems, kind of distorted to just say they're irrational for believing an a posteriori unwarranted conspiracy theory, right? It's not really irrational if you look at it from their point of view. And maybe that also opens up some, possibilities for rational debates with them.
Yes, because once we actually understand the standpoint, it then allows us to go, well, if we really think this conspiracy theory is unwarranted, then we can go, well, understanding that standpoint gives us the kind of epistemic access to go, but what about this evidence? Or what about this particular argument here? As opposed to what appears to be the standard response that most people have to unwarranted conspiracy theories believed by other people, which is to talk very loud for a very long time in the hope that more verbiage will change people's minds.
Yes, less of the ivory tower, engagement with these people, but more on the ground work. That's the idea, at least.
Yeah, and that's the wonderful thing about taking a social epistemic approach, because we then situate our epistemology in groups of people, as opposed to the kind of old style of epistemology of, I'm sitting in my armchair and my internal states are telling me I should believe this thing, and there's some external stimuli, and from that I can rationalize that everybody should think the same way as I do. And when I say I, that's usually in the philosophical literature a white man in his 50s living somewhere in Europe or the UK, given that the UK is no longer part of the EU.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to the first of your two papers of this year. So your paper, Conspiracy Theories Are Not Beliefs, is a reply to a book chapter by M. Julia Napolitano, Conspiracy Theories and Evidential Self-Insulation. I suspect we should probably cover what Napolitano claims before we get to your reply. So in her chapter, Napolitano concludes that conspiracy theories are self-insulated beliefs in the existence of conspiracies, and that if we understand conspiracy theories in that way, then belief in them is always irrational. So her position is a generalist one, right?
Yes.
And quite definitely. An arch generalist one, because it's really going, look, conspiracy theories are beliefs sans evidence. Beliefs sans evidence are always irrational. Ipso facto, conspiracy theory belief is irrational as well.
Yes, and I think that Napolitano's purpose with this paper was to, provide a conceptual basis for empirical research, which she is engaged in herself as well. And the reason that I wanted to respond to Napolitano's paper is that it just seemed that for a minimalist account, which I think is absolutely the only way to go also in empirical research, for a minimalist account to, be a viable option for empirical researchers, it must, I should show that how her account doesn't really work, even for empirical research. So she says that social psychologists and sociologists and etc. Think of conspiracy theories as a problem to be addressed, an epistemic deviant group of beliefs, so to say. And I think that there's already a lot of confusion there. So you have conspiracy theories, which are the explanations, and you have conspiracy beliefs, which are the theories being taken up by people and being believed, which is already a very different domain. And I think that especially for social psychologists, the beliefs are of much more interest than the conspiracy theories, even though most of the literature has been framed in terms of theories and not beliefs. So hence the title, Conspiracy Theories Are Not Beliefs.
Now, by minimalist definitional approach here, you're meaning the kind of particularist definition that we're just going to define a conspiracy theory as any explanation of an event that cites a conspiracy as a salient cause, or variations of that definition we see in the literature.
Yes, yeah. And the minimalist is exactly the one you just described. And I think the variations of the minimalist account are already, most of them are already less minimalist. So I would like to see a conceptual foundation that works across disciplines, that starts off from this very minimal definition, and then we can identify building blocks, as I call it in the paper, sort of conspiracy theories, the minimal definition plus. As opposed to official stories, as if the empirical researcher wants to test or wants to conduct an experiment where it's the conspiracy theories that oppose an official narrative instead of just all conspiracy theories. But then it's clear and more obvious that there is something being added to this minimalist definition.
Yeah, and the idea that maybe people have different interests when it comes to conspiracy theory is something which I think the literature as a whole needs to get to grips with, because you're right, there is this conceptual confusion going on between, are we interested in conspiracy theories, or are we interested in the kind of causative belief in conspiracy theories? And if we don't disambiguate the problem, we kind of end up talking at cross purposes. So what is Napolitano doing, and why? What do you think goes awry in her account?
So the first thing that I think goes wrong in Napolitano's account is that she wants to conceptualize conspiracy theory in a way that lines up with the negative connotations often accompanying conspiracy theory in ordinary language context, which I think is already impossible, because conspiracy theory gets thrown around so much in such different cases that I don't really think that the negative connotation can be captured by one evaluative conception of conspiracy theory. So I think that's the first sort of part where I disagree with her. And the second part is that Napolitano thinks that we need a negatively loaded and narrow conception, so narrow in the sense of not being the minimalist particularist definition that also allows in warranted conspiracy theories to be a conspiracy theory, which is already odd when I say it. So she thinks that we need a negatively loaded and narrow concept for empirical research, which I think is just not the case, both because it then narrows too much which conspiracy theories are being led into the research, and so doesn't give an actual view of all conspiracy theories generally, and also because social psychologists, sociologists, political scientists, already before Napolitano's paper was published, have kind of departed this very negative connotation conception of conspiracy theory. So it just seems that it's not the case that we need such a negatively loaded conception at all. Also not in empirical research settings.
Yeah, and this is a kind of weird consequence of Napolitano's notion of conspiracy theories as evidentially self-insulated, in that if you can show that someone who you call a conspiracy theorist changes their mind based upon new evidence, then it turns out they weren't a conspiracy theorist under Napolitano's definition when it comes to that particular conspiracy theory. And it's very easy to find radical examples here that should make people like Napolitano go, well, this can't be the right definition. The best one being Alex Jones. Alex Jones promoted the idea the Sandy Hook shootings were a false flag conspiracy run by the US government. And now, in court, he's admitting that he was wrong because he's seen new evidence that shows that the attacks did occur as described, and that he tries to run the argument he was right to doubt them in the first place, but he accepts on the basis of new evidence that conspiracy theory was false. So by Napolitano's definition, it seems that Alex Jones wasn't putting forward a conspiracy theory about the false flag shooting at Sandy Hook because his conspiracy theory was not evidentially his belief was not evidentially self-insulated, so doesn't count as a conspiracy theory according to her definition.
Which is odd because I think, the cases where people believe unwarranted conspiracy theories but change their belief should be of interest to us. And if you take on this evidentially self-insulated definition, then you lose, the ability to study these people and study these cases, which I think are most interesting if we're looking at depolarization possibilities.
Yeah. It seems like a very odd definition to kind of, as we sometimes say in English, hang your hat on. Why this particular definition when there are such obvious counters to it?
Yeah, one speculative explanation for why Napolitano went with this one anyway is maybe that, she wasn't interested in defining conspiracy theories. She was interested in defining a certain class of problematic conspiracy beliefs, namely those beliefs in conspiracy theories that are self-insulated, which is, of course, an interesting research endeavor, but it's not what she wrote down. So it remains a speculation.
Yes, it seems that she's interested in a species of what's often called conspiracism or conspiracist ideation in the literature. And I've been on record in the problem of conspiracism of going, well, actually, conspiracists as classically understood actually might not exist. It may not be the case that there are people who have completely irrational or irrational belief in conspiracy theories. But nonetheless, there are certain people out there who seem overly predisposed to see conspiracies where they aren't, and then express those as conspiracy theories. And also, conversely, there's probably a class of people who are very inclined to not see conspiracies where they actually are, so kind of reverse or a-conspiracism. And that stuff is worth investigating as a class of conspiracy belief. But it's a mistake to go, well, because there are people like conspiracists out there, all belief in conspiracy theories must be of that type.
Yes, definitely. And so I think that the confusion about conspiracy theories and conspiracy beliefs and where the negative connotation actually lies with is a super interesting question, and also is very important for the continuation of interdisciplinary research endeavors, which you are already you have been already engaged with, which is perfect with Martin Orr and Gina Husting. And I think such endeavors should, be more common, especially because conspiracy theory is a relatively new research area for both philosophers and social scientists, which gives us the unique opportunity to work together more than people in other domains in philosophy do, which I think is incredible, and also attests of the possible societal relevance philosophers may have with regards to this topic. which is my aim. Yeah.
Yes, and it would be quite nice if philosophers could once again be relevant to public discourse. We used to be, I mean, right up until the middle of the last century. Philosophers were engaged in being politically active individuals, but for some reason, the last 50 to 70 years, we've been living in these silos, and it's time for us to emerge and have our rightful place back in public debate.
Definitely, and that also requires that we're able to, speak the same language as these other researchers.
Yes, and of course that's turned out to be a quite difficult thing to do, because academic siloization hasn't just affected philosophers, it's affected all the academic disciplines. And it turns out we're often trying to talk about the same thing, but we're using such radically different language, it's hard to work out how to translate conceptual work in one domain to another.
Yes, and in the PhD, my supervisor and I were very aware of this, and also of the possible relevance and importance of doing interdisciplinary research, or at least producing research that is interdisciplinarily accessible, which is why I have an advisory board, so to say, of people from different disciplines who check in with my research every year and make sure that it's all up to date and up to standards in their domains, and then I'm not missing things. And I think one member of the board you will know, it's Jan van Kooijen.
I spent time with him in the Bilderberg Hotel several years ago.
Oh wow!
Now that
I don't know him that well, but
when I was the Romanian representative for the comparative analysis of conspiracy theories group Compact, he and I met up at the Bilderberg Hotel, which is one of the weirdest hotels you can ever spend time in, because I've never been in a hotel that has that many pictures of Henry Kissinger on walls. And I'm of the opinion that hotels need no pictures of Henry Kissinger. What you especially don't want a picture of Henry Kissinger in almost every room, but because of the association with the Bilderberg group, because it's named after the hotel, they're really leaning heavily on that aspect of their history. And so war criminal Henry Kissinger is everywhere. You cannot avoid his gaze.
That must have been a pleasant encounter.
It was a very interesting time had by all. Now, on the notion of doing interdisciplinary work and making sure we're talking with the right kind of terms that other people can understand, I think that's a nice way of getting into your forthcoming paper in the special issue of Social Epistemology that I'm editing. What does it mean for a conspiracy theory to be a theory? Because in that, you look at the kind of the loaded term we use when talking about our definitions, which is theory, and the way that actually theory is one of those group terms. There's a spectrum of things we mean by theory, and depending on your discipline or depending on your research interests, we sometimes mean very different things by theory when we talk about what these conspiracy theories are. So tell us a little bit about the spectrum of these things we call theories.
Yes, so I was, this was in the part of the PhD where I was still thinking a lot about generalism, particularism, and the different conceptions that are given to conspiracy theory. And in the beginning of the debate, it seemed that most philosophers and also other researchers were focusing on the fact that a conspiracy theory is about a conspiracy that makes it weird or bad or anything, because it's the conspiracy, because the theory is about a conspiracy, there's this evidential matter of the every counter evidence can be discarded because the conspirators have concealed the secret of their conspiracy, so it's all planted and nothing is what it seems, etc. And I just didn't really, I was mostly interested in the question, well, if that's the case, then why do we feel ill at ease why do we feel ill at ease to call an official conspiracy theory a conspiracy theory. Is it really about a conspiracy then, or is it something else? And then that really prompted the question, what does it mean for a conspiracy theory to be a theory? And I also considered the case that for some conspiracy theories, even those that most would find to be unwarranted, it seems that there's a little bit of a difference in tone in talking about those theories and really outlandish theories. So, for example, some of the, fake moon landing or 9/11 conspiracy theories, some of them are pretty well argued for, even though I believe they're wrong. They're still pretty elaborate, and it's not just that they're a hunch or that someone is just shouting the US is behind it, or a deep state is behind it, or anything like that. It's really a lot more sophisticated, and that made me think of the differences in which types of theory we're talking about. So in normal discourse, I think what we're thinking about is when we say theory is either an established account, so like a scientific theory, an hypothesis, so a possibility that's worthy of investigation, or really like a hunch, like, my theory about how my colleague has a bruise in her neck is such and such. And I think that some of the generalist accounts of conspiracy theory have made a lot of assumptions on the part of which kind of theory of these three, or where on the spectrum, where established account is on one end and hunch is on the other. Conspiracy theories in general will be placed, which is more on the side of a hunch than, of course, on an established account. And I think that the particularist will always say, well, you cannot just say about any conspiracy theory whether there is any evidential merit for them, so more on the hypothesis or established account side, or not. And this was just another way to maybe frame the particularist generalist discussion, and also to differently frame the negative connotations underlying conspiracy theory in ordinary language contexts. That helped me to at least understand a little bit better, how we should understand people's saying conspiracy theories are all bad or not.
Which, of course, makes a lot of sense with the way that the particularist generalist debate has kind of gone on in the literature, because as you say, particularists are assuming that when we talk about conspiracy theories, we're talking about some kind of explanation of an event, at which point you judge, is it a good explanation or a bad one, based upon what evidence or arguments are put forward. But if you're a generalist who has the notion that conspiracy theories are prima facie irrational, and you're basing that on the notion that actually most people don't have developed arguments for their conspiracy theories. They say it's a social contagion. They've heard a conspiracy theory or read a conspiracy theory on social media. They've been infected by it. It's a kind of hunch that they're just assuming is true. Then you're going to have a very different attitude towards these things called conspiracy theories, and that's going to drive the kind of research you do, and also potentially also, if you're, say, a social scientist engaging in giving policy advice, what kind of policy advice you're then going to give to people for dealing with these hunches we're finding everywhere in the world.
Yes, yeah. Great paraphrasing, yes.
And once again, it's one of those things where you're pointing out something which is obvious in retrospect. Actually, it turns out we mean different things by theory. But of course, one of those things which is obvious in retrospect, and yet no one's really talked about before now. So speciating out the fact that there are, on one end, the really established accounts, which if you're a generalist, you're going to say is some kind of official theory, which may involve a conspiracy in some kind, versus on the other end, the hunches, which are going to be the, those terrible, unwarranted conspiracy theories people have. Actually, doing that speciation is a really useful tool in our lexicon for working out how we can do interdisciplinary work by going, well, when you talk about a conspiracy theory, what you mean is something that's not very established, more hunch-like. Whilst when we're talking about conspiracy theories, we're unfortunately being rather rigid philosophers and go, well, when we talk about theories in our discipline, what we mean by this is, and then you get that particular account falling out.
Yeah, and I think what prompted the spectrum of conspiracy theories is also something else, which is I think that people who believe conspiracy theories do not always have like a credence of one in that belief, or however you would phrase that. So I don't think that people who believe a certain conspiracy theory are married to that exact narrative of how things went down. I think most conspiracy theory beliefs, unwarranted conspiracy theories beliefs, I should say, are more of the kind of, there's something suspicious. It may either be that the army is behind it, politicians are behind it, deep state is behind it, FBI is behind it. There may be various motivations, and I think that the official narrative is false. So the official narrative would not be an established account. The official narrative may have some things going for it, so it's more like downplayed to a hypothesis, or downplayed in relative to what most people think the official narrative has going for it. And all of these, clusters of conspiracy theories, they're also hypotheses. They're options, they're possibilities, they're viable explanations that, warrant that we're looking into it and to see whether one of them ends up being true or which one is the best of these. And I think when you study conspiracy beliefs, that's often left out of the picture, that conspiracy theory belief in unwarranted conspiracy theories seems somewhat more flexible or less rigid than belief in the official narrative, which is, I think, an important aspect. So is it really as belief as most of our beliefs are? And what do we think belief entails?
Yeah, I've been having some thoughts about this recently myself, thinking about how political affiliation works and how we ascribe political beliefs to people. So I've been thinking about how you can be a Democrat in the United States and you vote routinely for the Democratic Party. You would describe yourself as a Democrat. I mean, in some states, you have to actually register as a Democrat to be able to vote in particular primaries. But in many cases, Democrats will go, I'm a Democrat, but I don't agree with the entire party platform. Well, there are certain things which I think we're really bad at doing, and there might even be some Republican policies that Democrats are going, yes, I really think the party should adopt a view like that. And we recognize that when it comes to political belief, you don't have to believe everything in the platform to still subscribe to a political ideology or party affiliation. And yet, for some reason, when it comes to conspiracy theory belief, if someone says, "Oh yeah, I'm a big fan of Alex Jones," people go, "Oh well, you must literally believe that Democratic politicians are possessed by the devil because that's what Alex Jones says." And I suspect a lot of people who support Alex Jones are going, well, I think the demon stuff is a bit hyperbolic, but I do agree that, Democrats are out for our guns and they want to take away our civil liberties. I mean, I agree with Alex on that stuff, but the demonic possession stuff, I mean, either the believer thinks that Jones is being hyperbolic and doesn't literally believe it, or they'll go, well, I get the hyperbole, but I'm not actually willing to say that I believe they're literally possessed by demons. But for some reason, we kind of assume that conspiracy theorists are committed to every single part of their belief when we don't think that's true for other kinds of beliefs.
Yes, and it's also the case that I think that, people who believe in conspiracy theories could also, or agree with Alex Jones, could say, okay, well, I don't know about the, Democrats, wanting to drink our children's blood, for example. But if I was presented with some solid evidence, I would. So, there's some credence to it, but I'm not really believing it just yet, which is what all of us do all the time, right? It's when the first time there were, speculations about the origins of COVID-19. Was it an accident? Was it not? If people on the news are, expressing these doubts or these speculations, then I think what I would do and what I did was, okay, I'll suspend judgment until it becomes clear which story is true. And, it turned out that the virus was not released by China. So then that's what I'll believe. But it's more like a research program or endeavor that just continues, right? So for the flat Earth, for example, a lot of aspects or auxiliary hypotheses of the flat Earth theory are not carved into stone in any way, right? So there's still a lot of gaps in the story, and the people who believe that the Earth is flat accept those gaps, and they're just working to fill them in a way. It's not that they believe every part rigidly.
Yeah, it seems one of those things which is obvious in retrospect, and yet has been an operating assumption in the literature to date. And once again, it would be really quite useful when we're doing interdisciplinary work to find a way to actually make people aware of the kind of assumptions they bring from their own research programs or their own, and going back to the standpoint stuff, from their own kind of domains of interest, and go, well, actually, we should probably have a conversation about credences. We should probably have a conversation about what does belief in a conspiracy theory mean, because it does affect the kind of research programs we then engage in when studying those beliefs.
And especially in polling, right? So if you have a 7-point scale and you think that 1, 2, and 3, which are agree, and a lighter form of agree, are all agreement, then you're making conclusions about belief, right? So agree, belief. Well, it might just as well be, I'm willing to engage with this hypothesis, or I think there's some merit to it, but I don't believe it yet, right? There's just a lot of nuance, I think, there. And
well, see, I mean, I'm hoping it gets noticed and cited widely.
Yeah, that's what I would say, yeah.
Going back to the notion of interdisciplinarity, we've recently worked on a short piece for the Social Epistemology Review and Reply Collective, the Le Monde debate on conspiracy theories. Let's pretend I've never read this paper nor written a single word on it. What's that paper about?
It's about, okay, so those listeners that are familiar with Le Monde debate will probably agree with me that it's quite disheartening, right? There's a lot of, I would almost say, academic trash talking going on back and forth. And I think that especially when I read the comments by the authors of the initial Le Monde article minus Karen Douglas, when they were talking about, philosophers only working from their armchair and all of these things, while this goes completely against what I'm trying to do in the project, I just really felt that there should be some reconciliation of the debate. And I think that, there's probably less disagreement there, but at least between the authors of the Le Monde article and those who responded to the Le Monde article, which is you and Lee Basham, and I think Marius Raab and Gina Husting and Martin Orias. I think there's less disagreement there. I think it's, again, there's a difference about how we frame our research, and unfortunately that those framing options used by philosophers and by social scientists have clashed somewhat. Well, I think there really is room for reconciliation, but then when Hill got into the debate, that really revived the disagreements that I really don't think that are so problematic, at least for our research projects, right? Our research interests. And I think what Hill wanted to do kind of failed, but it was a good way to understand where the confusion actually lies, the conceptual confusion. So our joint piece is about the difference between talking about conspiracy theories and conspiracy beliefs again, and the possibility of, having this concept of conspiracy belief that aligns perfectly with conspiracy mindsets, conspiracism, all those things that the social scientists are mostly interested about. And that conception would be somewhat along the lines of, if people have a conspiracy mindset, if they have a lot more conspiracy beliefs than do most others. And that's context relative, of course. So someone in the Roman Empire would have had probably more, but this is speculation, conspiracy beliefs than do I or do you. Or, I had a student in my epistemology class from Russia whose parents lived in Ukraine, and their parents believed so many conspiracy theories that it's just that there seems to be a large rational difference between people in different contexts in the number of conspiracy beliefs they have. And even if we have this minimalist account of, warranted conspiracy theories are also conspiracy theories, then we could still say that there's maybe somewhat like an average of conspiracy beliefs, number of conspiracy beliefs people have. And there's people who just really have a lot more conspiracy beliefs. And those seem to be the cases that social psychologists are interested in. So it seems that we can still have the minimalist particularist story and also have a way of, handing social scientists a concept that's fruitful for them and that's operationalizable for them, without having to have this whole debate about that went on in the Le Monde literature.
I'd say from a personal perspective, it was quite irritating when Scott resurrected the Le Monde debate, because to my mind it had been well over 6 years since there'd been any betting in the game between the instigators and the commentators, as we refer to them in our paper, and for it suddenly to reappear 6 years later. Okay, so this is not a remake or a sequel that anybody asked for.
Yes. Yes, definitely. And it's also not a new argument, right? There's no new arguments. It's just reliving the debate that has been going on for 20 years already, or even more than 20 years, since Charles Pigden and Brian Keeley got engaged with conspiracy theory. There's just not a way to a priori determine which conspiracy theories are bad and which are not. So, yeah, that also... I understand why it was irritating to you to relive that whole debate again.
Yes, I mean, I'll try that again. For listeners, you can actually go to socialepistemology.com, that's social-epistemology.com, and all the papers are free to download there. But the kind of argument that Hill is trying to put forward is that social scientists are right to have a research program looking at the ills of stereotypical conspiracy theory beliefs. And the issue is, and as Julie have pointed out, Brian Keeley mentioned this back in 1999, there is no mark of the incredible that allows us to distinguish whether a conspiracy theory is stereotypical, aka false, or something which should be treated seriously, without someone actually going and doing at least a preliminary investigation to see what features it has, what kind of arguments it relies upon, and what evidence has been elicited in support of it. So sure, if there was a way to detect stereotypical conspiracy theories just by a glance, that would be a perfect thing for social scientists to engage in the research of. But we can't do that, so we have to have a more nuanced view of both conspiracy theory and what a conspiracy belief is going to be.
Yes, and I think that also connects very well with a posteriori particularism. I really should find a better name in my research project, but when you know that there's a certain conspiracy theory that's stereotypical, if we have a definition of what this stereotype or, the features of the stereotype should entail, which is already very difficult, then maybe, of course, we can, say something about these past or already existing conspiracy theories. But that doesn't give us the tools to make predictions about future conspiracy theories, which may or may not turn out to be unwarranted, right? So it's as Hill's argument is right now, we can just only say something about past conspiracy theories that are already found to be wanting or not, but it doesn't give us tools to approach newer conspiracy theories or future conspiracy theories.
Yeah, and the odd thing is, if you're going to do a generalism based upon past conspiracy theories, that generalism needs to accept that for that generalism to have been established about past conspiracy theories, people had to be particularists, because as we can't spot bad conspiracy theories at a glance, we only know they're bad because someone actually went and said, here's why they're bad.
And that seems to me like one of the most pressing things we should research, especially in this age of where misinformation and disinformation are, spread so much more easily or created more easily or have a bigger outreach because of the internet and everything, that it seems to me that finding out which conspiracy theory has evidential merits and which does not is an interesting and important topic to discuss. And we can't just say everything like this in the future will be unwarranted. That seems very, very odd to me.
Yes, it does seem like epistemic hubris if we were to make that kind of assumption. That is the kind of assumption that would come back to haunt us at some point, in the same respect kind of haunted the people who supported the idea that the US and the UK definitely weren't lying about the evidence for those weapons of mass destruction.
Yes, definitely. It just because it's a deviant explanation doesn't mean it's wrong. And I think that should be important for our epistemic well-beings as social people. But yeah, so it's just, I've this is my second year, so I have 5 more years to go.
Is it a PhD by dissertation or a PhD by published papers? I've actually never asked you this. I feel I should know this.
It's a PhD by dissertation, but I've not really been as interested yet in writing the chapters, because every time I do start writing a chapter, it turns out to be a paper. And I don't know, I think I'll just progress in this way, writing papers and just finding one interesting question to answer or to look at, and then hopefully everything will come together in the end.
All you need to do is you just take the literature review bits at the beginning of each individual article, cut and paste them into a chapter called Introduction, and then just rewrite the beginning of each paper so they feel like chapters rather than individual works, and I'm sure it'll be fine.
Yes, hopefully so, yes.
So, I mean, this is one of those projects that will keep going on for a while. I mean, I know around about 2019, I thought I was going to kind of end my association of doing work on conspiracy theories and move on to doing other projects. And then the COVID-19 pandemic occurred, and it turned out I had a lot more to say about conspiracy theories. And I think there's going to be a lot more to say for a while to come.
Yes, definitely. And I think also because, the lockdown has also revived a lot of older or, conspiracy theories like big pharma, vaccine, anti-vax, stuff like that. And I think these will not just go away. Also because they're, in a way, urban myths of some kind, right? It's just the same suspicions that will always be there, that people will always have as work by a lot of historians has also shown, is that conspiracy theories we see today have been present in history for almost all of the time, just in different different forms.
Yes, actually, I was thinking before when you were talking about how, there seems to be this kind of background noise of conspiracy theorizing in politics over time. There's a really interesting empirical question, and I actually don't know how we would ever find out the answer to it, as to what the natural level of conspiracy theorizing in human populations generally would be. And it's hard to answer because we'd have to factor in different political economies will affect your tendency to see or not see conspiracy theories. Are going to be the way we view different marginalized or oppressed communities. But there is a really interesting question as to whether there's a base rate that we could identify. And then that might give us an answer to the apparent problem of conspiracy theorizing if we could point towards things which exacerbate that and make it rise above a particular level. Or conversely, if there are things that actually make it dip below that natural level, which then mean we stop spotting actual conspiracies going on in our polities.
Yeah, and I think this is maybe somewhat along the lines of what Jan Willem van Prooij has been saying for a while, like social crises, make conspiracy theory beliefs proliferate. So the people that I was talking about in the start of the interview, people I knew who started believing conspiracy theories, they only started believing them when the lockdown hit. And the moment the lockdown was lifted, so were the conspiracy theories. They just disappeared. There was no more reason to really uphold these beliefs, so they weren't anymore.
Yes, which actually then gets on to another entire issue about whether some of the work going on in conspiracy theory at the moment is the product of a kind of a recency bias issue. But that's it's a whole other conversation we'll have to have at another time. We should probably bring this discussion to a close. It's been an absolutely enchanting discussion where I've pretended to not know a lot of things about the work you're doing in order that the audience can find out about things. But where to next? You've already said about some of the work you want to do towards the end of this year, although I suppose actually we are now at the end of this year. But what does year 3 bring to your project?
Hopefully the empirically informed conspiracy theory research will be something I can really start off with. So one thing I've always wanted to do was my planning for the PhD project is not as rigid as it probably should be, but here it goes anyway. It's something like the really close reading of argumentation for specific conspiracy theories. So what kind of arguments are being appealed to? Why are they found to be convincing? How does expert testimony appeal work for conspiracy theory arguments? Stuff like that. That would be awesome. But that would also mean a lot of educating myself on how to go about doing such empirically informed research.
Yes, and having done some work with Martin Orr and Jed Husting doing survey work recently, it's a lot more complicated than simply asking questions. You start talking with social scientists and they'll go, you do realize that's a stupid question. You go, oh, in retrospect, yes, but I probably would have asked it anyway if you hadn't actually stepped in and pointed out what's wrong with it. So, yes, it'll be exciting to see what that project looks like.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Julia, for a great conversation. Hopefully we will talk again very soon.
Yes, surely.
Yes.
Maybe Thursday.
Yeah,
but,
maybe
thanks,
Thursday indeed.
Yeah. Thanks, Em. I really enjoyed it. And give my regards to Josh.
I will indeed. We will talk soon. The Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy stars Josh Addison and myself, Associate Professor MRX Dentith. Our show's producers are Tom and Philip, plus another mysterious anonymous donor. You can contact Josh and myself at podcastconspiracy@gmail.com, and please do consider joining our Patreon. And remember, nothing is real. Everything is permitted, but conditions apply.